Sophia was a girl who had a generous heart and an altruistic spirit. She was raised in a humble family, where she learned the value of solidarity and mutual aid from an early age. She was known at school for her willingness to help her classmates, especially those who had difficulty with their studies. Miguel was one of these classmates, and he was a shy and withdrawn boy. His complicated financial and family situation often made him miss classes. One morning during math class, Miguel had a look of despair on his face. The instructor, Mrs. Oliveira, explained a difficult concept, and he couldn't keep up. Considering his dilemma, Sophia discreetly wrote some explanatory notes on paper and passed them to Miguel. She knew he wouldn't have the courage to ask for help personally, and that without her intervention, he would be even more lost. But Mrs. Oliveira noticed this attempt to help. She was a teacher known for her rigidity and lack of tolerance for any distraction. Upon noticing the movement in the room, she abruptly interrupted her explanation. "How dare you disrespect my class like this, Sophia? Stand up immediately," the teacher ordered furiously. Sophia's face turned pale as she quickly stood up, surprised and scared. The whole class was looking at her. She felt the humiliation descend upon her. "Do you consider this a game? Do you think you can do whatever you want? What a lack of consideration. Didn't your family raise you properly?" Mrs. Oliveira's furious and contemptuous statements echoed through the classroom. With her heart racing, Sophia tried to explain. She began to say that she was just trying to help, but the teacher interrupted her. "Do not speak. Do not give me excuses." Mrs. Oliveira's voice was strong and persistent. "This is a place to learn, free of distractions. Do you think you can keep writing notes and interrupting the class without causing any problems?" In tense silence, the entire class watched. Some students had expressions of fear, while others looked at Sophia with sympathy. Miguel felt even more uncomfortable and guilty for having been the indirect cause of the situation. "I just wanted to help Miguel," Sophia said, her voice trembling with emotion and tears threatening to fall. "He doesn't understand the subject." "I don't want to hear anything else," exclaimed Mrs. Oliveira. "Learn to obey the rules of this classroom." In the silent classroom, the teacher's words echoed like stones. She ordered Sophia to sit at the front of the class to show what would happen to anyone who violated the rules. Miguel tried to intervene, saying it wasn't Sophia's fault, but was immediately silenced by the teacher with an authoritative gesture. Miguel shrank back in his chair, having nothing else to say. He felt a mix of guilt and helplessness, wanting to do something to help Sophia. He knew that Sophia only wanted to help him and that the situation was extremely unfair. At the same time, Sophia felt completely humiliated and walked slowly to the front of the classroom. As she thought about how everything had gone wrong, tears rolled down her face. With pain and injustice burning in her chest, she thought, "Why can't she understand that I just wanted to help?" The next day, Mrs. Oliveira entered the classroom with the same aura of authority she usually brought. The class remained silent, with students still worried about what had happened the previous day. With short hair and bright gray-green eyes, the teacher placed her materials on the table and noticed something different. Her notebook had a small folded note. She picked up the note and began to read it, curious. The first words made her pause. "Mrs. Oliveira, I need you to know everything that happened yesterday." The handwriting was careful, showing the seriousness and effort with which it was written. The note continued explaining Miguel's problems, how there was no food at home, and he often came to school without eating. Since his father left the family, his mother struggled to care for Miguel and his two younger siblings. Miguel was shy and introverted about his situation, and rarely discussed it with others. Sophia was the only person who knew what he was going through, so she always tried to help him. After reading the note, Mrs. Oliveira felt increasingly uncomfortable and guilty. She didn't know what was going on in Miguel's life. To her, he was just another student who didn't pay attention in class. The heavy burden of her actions and words from the previous day now weighed on her. The teacher began to feel remorse, thinking about how blind and insensitive she had been. She felt great regret when she remembered the fear and sadness in Sophia and Miguel's eyes. Mrs. Oliveira had always believed that discipline was essential for success. She grew up in an environment where discipline was strict. Her father was a severe and intolerant man. Her approach as a teacher was shaped by this worldview. She believed she was doing her best for her students, preparing them for life's difficulties. However, The note from Sophia revealed a truth she had never seen. The girl's words awakened painful memories of her own difficult childhood, where she too was treated with cruelty and a lack of understanding. To justify her indifference, she used to say, "People need to be strong, like me." Miguel's story, however, showed that not everyone had the same resources or resilience. After finishing reading the note, she looked at the class. The students were anxiously waiting for the lesson to start. The teacher felt a knot in her stomach as a result of her actions. She still didn't know what to do to fix the problem. After class, Mrs. Oliveira invited Sophia for a private conversation. Sophia entered the teacher's office with a pounding heart, not knowing what to expect. "Sophia, I understand that you were trying to help your friend," said the teacher, with an expression softer than usual, looking at her. "Yesterday was very difficult for me, and I apologize for that." Sophia took a deep breath and tried to avoid crying. "Mrs. Oliveira, I just wanted to help. Miguel doesn't understand the subject and has no one at home to help him," Sophia explained with a trembling, low voice. The teacher listened carefully and realized the gravity of the injustice she had committed. "Outside the classroom, colleagues should help each other, Sophia. Here, you must focus on learning on your own." The teacher, maintaining her authoritative stance, stated that her disobedience was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. Sophia left the teacher's office with a heavy heart. She felt humiliated and wronged, but she was more concerned about Miguel. She knew he needed help, and the public punishment wouldn't solve his problems. Although she tried to remain focused, she returned to the classroom and felt the stares of her classmates on her. Some seemed to show sympathy, while others seemed simply curious. During the lesson, Mrs. Oliveira continued using her rigorous teaching method. She was firmly convinced that discipline was essential to keep things organized and ensure students focused on their studies. But the experience of Sophia and Miguel that day challenged her beliefs. Miguel, sitting at his desk, was distracted. He felt deeply guilty for causing Sophia's humiliation. Although he tried to explain to the teacher that it wasn't her fault, he was immediately silenced. He felt powerless and unable to change things. The tension in the air made other students uncomfortable as well. As she tried to continue the lesson, Sophia kept thinking repeatedly, "I just wanted to help Miguel." The teacher's severe look and the curious eyes of her classmates accompanied her every time she lifted her head. She knew that something needed to change, but she didn't know how to do it because the situation was unsustainable. When the lesson ended, Sophia went home with a heavy heart. She wanted to do good, but she didn't know why her kindness was being punished so severely. Her mother, Clara, a dark-skinned woman with calloused hands from work, welcomed her home. Clara quickly noticed her daughter's state and asked, "What happened, Sophia?" "It was Mrs. Oliveira," Sophia explained with a trembling voice of despair and emotion. "She humiliated me in front of the entire class for trying to help Miguel." Trying to comfort her, Clara hugged her. "You just wanted to help. Sometimes people don't understand our good deeds," Clara said as she stroked her daughter's hair. Although Sophia felt the warmth of her mother's embrace, her chest still burned with injustice. "It was very cruel. I just wanted Miguel to understand the subject," Sophia said, feeling her tears flow again. Clara felt her daughter's pain as if it were her own, sighing. "Mrs. Oliveira may have her own problems, but that doesn't justify her actions. Perhaps she can understand if you explain." Clara tried to ease Sophia's burden. Although she knew the teacher was an authoritative and strict person, the mother couldn't ignore her daughter's suffering. As she helped her mother with household chores, Sophia couldn't stop thinking, "I need to talk to Miguel tomorrow. He needs to know it wasn't his fault," Sophia decided. She felt a new determination within her. She knew she had to continue helping her friend, regardless of any outcome. Although the next day started like any other, there was a sense of tension. Sophia entered the school with a combination of determination and fear. She knew she needed to talk to Miguel and let him know she didn't blame him for anything. At the same time, she was worried about how Mrs. Oliveira would handle any new attempt to help her friend. The math class was in full swing. As usual, the teacher started the lesson by reviewing the concepts discussed the previous day. Noticing Miguel's growing discomfort, Sophia watched him out of the corner of her eye. She looked for a way to help him without drawing Mrs. Oliveira's attention. Unfortunately, things got worse when the teacher saw Sophia trying to help Miguel again. She inadvertently interrupted the lesson. "Sophia, once again, you're distracting and disrupting others. Stand up immediately." Mrs. Oliveira's voice was more rigid and severe than ever. Sophia stood up again, desperate. Although she couldn't remain silent, she knew that trying to explain would only increase her reprimand. "Mrs. Oliveira, I was just trying to help Miguel. He really needs help," she stated in a trembling voice. "Do not speak. Do not give me excuses," the teacher shouted. "This is a place to learn, free of distractions. Do you think you can keep writing notes and interrupting the class without causing any problems?" Seeing his friend being humiliated once again, Miguel felt the need to stand up and protect her. "It wasn't her fault, Mrs. Oliveira. I needed help," he stated bravely. The teacher gave Miguel a cold look. "Do you think you can speak to me like that? Go back to your seat and stay quiet," she ordered, making an authoritative gesture. Miguel shrank back in his chair, having nothing else to say. He felt a mix of guilt and helplessness, wanting to do something to help Sophia. He knew that Sophia only wanted to help him, and that the situation was extremely unfair. Sophia stood at the front of the class, tears rolling down her face. With pain and injustice burning in her chest, she thought, "Why can't she understand that I just wanted to help?" She knew her intention to help Miguel shouldn't be punished so severely. With her cold and relentless green eyes, Mrs. Oliveira looked at the class. "This should serve as a lesson to everyone here. The most important rule is discipline. Anyone who doesn't respect that will suffer the consequences," she stated, her words cutting through the air. The entire class remained silent, fear evident. Some students looked at Sophia with sympathy, while others seemed just relieved they weren't in her position. She felt alone and vulnerable, but Sophia was determined to help Miguel at any cost. After the lesson, Sophia was summoned to Mrs. Oliveira's office. She walked slowly down the hallways, feeling the weight of injustice and humiliation with each step. Upon reaching the office, she knocked softly on the door and heard the teacher's authoritative voice ordering her to enter. "Do you understand why you are here, Sophia?" Mrs. Oliveira asked with a disapproving tone and a severe look. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I just wanted to help Miguel, Mrs. Oliveira. He has no one at home to help him and doesn't understand the subject. While I know he should have waited until after class, he was completely lost." Sophia was interrupted by the teacher before she could finish. "Help outside the classroom, Sophia. Here you must focus on learning on your own. Your irresponsibility is unacceptable and will not be tolerated." Sophia tried again, her voice trembling with emotion. "But Mrs. Oliveira, he can't understand. He was lost and needed help." The teacher, with her relentless and cold eyes, looked at Sophia. "I don't want to hear anything else. Learn to respect the rules set in this classroom." Sophia felt her tears threatening to fall again, but tried to remain composed. "Mrs. Oliveira, I just wanted to help. I didn't mean to break your rules." Mrs. Oliveira was silent for a moment, and her words echoed in the small room. "Sophia, do you think that not following the rules is acceptable? Do you think you have the freedom to do whatever you want without facing consequences?" "No, ma'am. I understand that rules are essential. But sometimes people need help," Sophia said, her voice almost a whisper. The teacher pondered Sophia's words, remaining silent. She had always believed that discipline was the key to success. Growing up in an environment where discipline was imposed with a heavy hand, she never questioned this method. However, now she looked at Sophia and saw a girl who was only trying to do good. Finally, Mrs. Oliveira sighed. "Sophia, I understand that you were trying to help your friend, but you must learn to follow the rules and find the appropriate means to help. Now, return to class and behave." Still carrying the weight of injustice, Sophia nodded. Returning to the classroom, she was determined to find a way to help Miguel without breaking the teacher's rules. Throughout the day, Sophia continued thinking of ways to help Miguel. She knew he needed continuous help, not just during class. Perhaps she could use the time after school to go over the lessons. She needed to keep her head high and face Mrs. Oliveira bravely. Despite her rigid and authoritative posture, Mrs. Oliveira couldn't ignore Sophia's words. The girl's desperate effort to help her friend made her reflect on her own teaching methods and discipline. She always believed her method was the best, but now she began to wonder if her rigidity was actually harming her students. That night, Mrs. Oliveira sat in her favorite chair, where she usually meditated on the day and planned the next lessons. With a cup of hot tea in hand, she began to reflect on Sophia's words and the note the girl had left on her desk. She couldn't forget the guilt she felt after hearing Sophia's words about Miguel's difficulties. The teacher began to feel remorse for being so blind and insensitive. She felt great regret when she remembered the fear and sadness in Sophia and Miguel's eyes. Mrs. Oliveira had always believed that discipline was essential for success. She grew up in an environment where discipline was strict. Her father was a severe and intolerant man. Her approach as a teacher was shaped by this worldview. She believed she was doing her best for her students, preparing them for life's difficulties. However, the note from Sophia revealed a truth she had never seen. The girl's words awakened painful memories of her own difficult childhood, where she too was treated with cruelty and a lack of understanding. To justify her indifference, she used to say, "People need to be strong like me." Miguel's story, however, showed that not everyone had the same resources or resilience. In a moment of reflection, Mrs. Oliveira realized that her approach needed to be changed. While discipline was necessary, it was also vital to understand and help students, especially those facing personal and family challenges. The next day, the teacher decided to take a new approach. Though she maintained her authority, she entered the classroom with a gentler demeanor. "Good morning, class. Today we're going to try something a little different," she said, observing the curious students. She realized that her rigidity was not the only way to ensure learning. She needed to find a way to balance compassion and discipline. She decided to observe her students more closely, trying to understand their needs and finding ways to help them without disrupting the classroom structure. Noticing that Sophia and Miguel were more attentive during the lesson, but there was still a certain discomfort in the air, Mrs. Oliveira said, "Sophia, Miguel, please come to my desk after class." Both were surprised by Oliveira's request. After the lesson ended, Sophia and Miguel approached the teacher's desk with nervousness and curiosity about what she would say. "I read your note, Sophia," said the teacher, looking directly at the girl. "And I wasn't aware of the difficulties you were facing, Miguel." Miguel lowered his head in embarrassment, but Mrs. Oliveira continued, "I want you to know that I'm here to help. I know I was harsh, and I'm very sorry for that. Let's figure out how you can study together without interrupting the class. How about after school?" Surprised and relieved, Sophia and Miguel looked at each other. "Thank you, ma'am. That would be great," Sophia responded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Despite Mrs. Oliveira's efforts to accommodate the situation, Sophia still felt the weight of injustice and humiliation. Her self-esteem and relationships with her classmates continued to suffer the effects of the classroom incident. The feeling of being small and vulnerable accompanied her with the whispers and glances each time she entered the room. The teacher's decision to allow Sophia and Miguel to study together after class was a small step in the right direction, but it wasn't enough to alleviate the pain and shame Sophia felt. She knew it would take time to recover from what had happened. Sophia tried to concentrate on her lessons, but her mind kept returning to the incident. The authoritative voice of Mrs. Oliveira, the harsh words, and the feeling of being judged and exposed in front of her classmates were hard to forget. Still, she made an effort to continue, determined to help Miguel and not let a bad experience dictate her future. Miguel also felt guilty and grateful. He knew that Sophia had been punished for trying to help him and was aware of it. He decided that he needed to improve his studies so Sophia wouldn't have to risk herself for him again. The next day, he focused even more on the lessons, asking questions and trying to understand better. The mutual support between Miguel and Sophia was essential. They met after school every day to share snacks and review lessons. Sophia also found that explaining the concepts to Miguel improved her understanding of the subject. They bonded and were determined to overcome the obstacles together. Meanwhile, Mrs. Oliveira continued to reflect on her approach. Although she had shifted to a more understanding stance, she knew she needed to do more to make amends. She decided to closely observe Sophia and Miguel, looking for ways to support them without disrupting classroom discipline. One particularly difficult day, Sophia struggled to concentrate in class. The memories of humiliation were particularly intense that day. She felt physically and emotionally exhausted. The teacher noticed Sophia's situation and made an unexpected decision. "Sophia, could you meet me in my office after class?" Mrs. Oliveira asked in a softer tone than usual. The request surprised Sophia, who nodded. After class, she went to the teacher's office with her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what to expect. The teacher began, looking at the girl with compassion. "Sophia, I know what happened was very hard for you. I want you to know that I am making an effort to change. You have helped me understand my students' needs better." Sophia remained silent, absorbing what the teacher said. She couldn't have imagined Mrs. Oliveira being so gentle and vulnerable. "Thank you, ma'am. This means a lot to me," Sophia said, her voice trembling with emotion. After their conversation, Sophia felt an unexpected relief. Despite the pain of humiliation, she felt that a path to healing was beginning to open. She knew it would take time, but she now had hope that things would get better. Still with a heavy heart, Sophia returned home with a new spark of hope. Although the advance with Mrs. Oliveira was just a small step in the right direction, the resulting anguish was still very real. She knew that overcoming what had happened would require time and support. Her mother, Clara, was always present at home, offering words of encouragement and comfort. "Sophia, you are a strong girl. While I know what happened was unfair, you are not alone. We're all here to support you," Clara said, holding her daughter's hands. While Sophia tried to stay calm, the pain and shame were often overwhelming. Each time she thought about the incident, she felt angry and sad. With injustice burning in her chest, she thought, "Why can't she understand that I just wanted to help?" Previously, school was a place to learn and socialize. Now it felt like a minefield. Sophia had to navigate carefully to avoid the curious looks and whispers of her classmates. She felt lonely and vulnerable, but was determined to continue helping Miguel and not let one bad experience define her future. Miguel knew about Sophia's internal struggle and tried to be by her side all the time. They continued to study together after school, and Sophia felt comforted knowing she was making a difference in her friend's life. Miguel, on the other hand, was determined to improve his studies so he wouldn't rely so much on Sophia and to prevent her from risking herself again. One day, while Sophia was helping Miguel with homework, he stopped and looked at her sincerely. "Sophia, I'm deeply sorry for what happened. You didn't deserve such treatment. I promise I'll try harder to understand the material and not need so much help," Miguel said with a determined voice. Miguel's words had a profound impact on Sophia. She knew he was deeply sorry and determined to improve. "Don't worry, Miguel. We're in this together, and we'll overcome everything no matter what," Sophia said with an encouraging smile. Over time, Sophia began to notice small changes in Mrs. Oliveira's behavior. It seemed the teacher was more attentive and less rigid, showing signs of understanding and empathy that were not visible before. These changes slowly relieved Sophia, who started to feel the classroom was becoming a safer place. Seeing her daughter's growth, Clara continued to provide unwavering support. "Sophia, you are a wonderful young lady. Never let others' cruelty dim your light. The world needs more people like you," Clara said with a firm and loving voice. Hearing her mother's words, Sophia found strength in her family's love and support. Although there was still a long way to go, Sophia was determined to keep fighting not only for herself, but also for Miguel and other students going through similar situations. As Sophia and Miguel persisted in facing their challenges, Mrs. Oliveira went through a period of deep reflection. She often sat alone in her home, with its old furniture and framed family photographs around her. The house was quiet, with only the ticking of the clock on the wall. The house felt very empty since her husband, Carlos, passed away, and her children moved to other cities. She felt the weight of loneliness, but now faced a new type of discomfort, regret. She had always believed that discipline was the solution to all problems, so she never had to deal with empathy. However, this belief had been shaken by Sophia's words and Miguel's reality. "Was I too demanding?" Mrs. Oliveira thought. "Carlos always insisted I be kinder and more understanding, but I never listened." She remembered conversations with her husband, who always tried to show her a gentler path. Now these memories brought a feeling of pain and guilt. Mrs. Oliveira had always believed that discipline was essential for success. She grew up in an environment where discipline was strict. Her father was a severe and intolerant man. Her approach as a teacher was shaped by this worldview. She believed she was doing her best for her students, preparing them for life's difficulties. However, the note from Sophia revealed a truth she had never seen. The girl's words awakened painful memories of her own difficult childhood, where she too was treated with cruelty and a lack of understanding. To justify her indifference, she used to say, "People need to be strong like me." Miguel's story, however, showed that not everyone had the same resources or resilience. The educator pondered about her own children. Both had moved to other cities to build their own lives, but she never knew if they truly understood why she was so strict. Did they see her as an authoritarian mother who only knew how to impose discipline, or did they recognize her intentions to prepare them for the world? Memories of her children growing up and facing difficulties surfaced in her mind as she flipped through an old photo album. They never thanked me for my strictness, she thought bitterly. However, she wondered if the lack of gratitude indicated that her method was wrong. That same night, Mrs. Oliveira concluded that finding a balance was necessary. While she knew that discipline was important, she now understood that comprehension and empathy were also crucial. Feeling the need for change, she murmured, "I need to be more understanding to better grasp my students' needs." However, she knew that altering something so deeply ingrained in her personality would be challenging. Before going to bed, she looked at a picture of Carlos on the bedside table. Hoping to find some direction in the memories, she asked aloud, "If you were here, what would you tell me?" She closed her eyes, waiting for the answers from the new day. The next morning, Mrs. Oliveira woke up with a new determination. Her mind was busy with ideas on how she could help Miguel and other students facing similar issues while having breakfast. She thought about support programs and projects that could be implemented in the school to ensure no student was left behind. When she arrived at school, she went straight to the principal's office. "I need to discuss an important idea with you, Mr. Rodriguez," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The curious principal invited her in. "Relax, Elvira. What brings you here so early?" asked the principal, noticing the urgency in her voice. "I want to propose establishing a meal plan for students who come to school without food," Mrs. Oliveira explained, her dedication evident in every word. "I've noticed that many of them struggle to concentrate and learn because they're hungry." The principal listened carefully, observing the sincerity in the teacher's eyes. "I understand, Elvira. This is absolutely necessary. How do you plan to implement it?" he asked with curiosity. "We can involve teachers, parents, and the community," Mrs. Oliveira said, taking a deep breath. "Organize funds and create a basic cafeteria. We need to ensure these children have a healthy meal so they can focus on their studies." The principal nodded as he thought. "I'll discuss this with the other teachers. I'm sure they'll want to help. You have my support." Mrs. Oliveira felt a sense of relief and gratitude. After thanking him, she returned to her classroom with new energy and motivation. When she entered, Miguel was sitting at his desk, still a bit nervous. She decided to do something today to show her genuine concern. During the lesson, Mrs. Oliveira made a deliberate effort to be more compassionate and attentive. She learned that small changes in her attitude could have a big impact. She called Sophia and Miguel for a private conversation after class. "I know what happened was difficult for you kids. I want to apologize again and make it clear that I'm here to help," the teacher said, sincerity in her voice. Miguel and Sophia exchanged looks, surprised by the teacher's change in perspective. "Thank you, Mrs. Oliveira. This means a lot to us," Sophia said, feeling a renewed sense of hope. "I brought something for you," the teacher continued, smiling. She handed them a small bag containing some snacks and study materials. "This is to help you concentrate better. We'll work together to ensure you get all the support you need." Miguel, his eyes shining with gratitude, looked at the bag. Feeling appreciated and valued, he said, "Thank you so much, Mrs. Oliveira." With the principal's and fellow educators' support, Mrs. Oliveira began making changes to her school routine. Besides the meal program, she started organizing tutoring sessions after class to help students facing difficulties. The results were immediately evident. Miguel began to improve significantly in his studies because he was better nourished and more confident. He and Sophia continued to study together, but now felt more motivated and valued with the teacher's support. The classroom, once a tense and rigid place, now became more welcoming and collaborative. The students were more willing to ask questions and participate in the lessons. Over time, understanding and empathy became part of the school's culture. Mrs. Oliveira's efforts did not go unnoticed by the parents in the school community. Seeing the benefits of the meal program and the tutoring sessions, many parents started volunteering and donating food and school supplies. The school became a place where the community came together to help each other, ensuring the children had what they needed to thrive. One day, during a parent-teacher meeting, Mrs. Oliveira expressed her desire to create a school environment where all children felt valued and supported. "I believe that together, we can transform our school into a place where every child has the opportunity to grow and learn without the barriers of hunger and lack of resources," she said with enthusiasm. The parents applauded and committed to continuing to support the initiatives. More than ever, the school community was working together to improve the future of all the students. Over time, Mrs. Oliveira's actions began to spread. Students who had previously been unmotivated and struggling began to make significant progress. Grades improved, and the school environment became more encouraging and inclusive. Miguel and Sophia were the living examples of this transformation. Miguel, now more self-confident and well-nourished, excelled in his classes. Sophia, inspired by the teacher's change in attitude, continued helping her classmates and demonstrated natural leadership, becoming a beloved figure among the students. Mrs. Oliveira, on the other hand, felt fulfilled. She experienced a joy she hadn't felt in years, seeing her students' progress and the positive changes in the school. While the journey hadn't been easy, every step towards empathy and understanding was worth it. The school organized a party to celebrate the success of the meal program and the new initiatives. Parents, teachers, and students gathered in the cafeteria, decorated with balloons and colorful ribbons, to celebrate the positive impact of the changes. Mrs. Oliveira was nervous and proud as she stepped onto the stage to speak. "Today is a special day. We are here to celebrate the success of our students and the positive impact that small acts of kindness can have," she began, her voice slightly trembling. She told the story of Sophia and Miguel, and how Sophia's attempt to help her friend triggered a series of events that changed the school. "Sophia taught me the importance of kindness and empathy just as much as discipline," the teacher said, looking at the two students in the crowd. "She and Miguel are examples of how we can overcome challenges when we work together." The audience gave a standing ovation, recognizing the dedication and effort of everyone involved. It was a moment of celebration and acknowledgement of the power of a united community. After the ceremony, Miguel and Sophia approached Mrs. Oliveira. "We want to thank you for everything you've done for us, Mrs. Oliveira," Sophia said, tears in her eyes. "Your understanding and support have changed our lives." Miguel held Sophia's hand and said, "I would never have been able to improve my studies without everyone's help. Thank you for believing in us." The teacher hugged the two students with emotion. "You have taught me as much as I have taught you," she said with gratitude. "Keep being amazing and never stop helping others." The celebration was just the beginning. Mrs. Oliveira knew that there was still much work to be done, but she was determined to continue supporting the school community. Watching the students play and the parents chat animatedly, she thought, "Together, we can create a better future for everyone." She began to think of new activities for the students, like mentorship programs and extracurricular activities to boost their skills and confidence. She knew they could achieve great things with the community's help. 5 years passed since Mrs. Oliveira initiated the changes in the school. Sophia and Miguel were about to graduate from high school at 17. Both had excelled academically over the years, persevering in their goals. Sophia was a determined and generous person who always remembered the opportunities and encouragement the school and community gave her. "I'll carry these lessons with me for life," she thought, grateful to everyone who helped her along the way. Miguel, who had faced so many obstacles, was now a determined and strong young man, inspired by his friend's example. As he looked at Sophia with admiration, he thought, "My life has changed so much since those difficult times. I never thought I could achieve so much." Mrs. Oliveira, watching the two young people during the graduation ceremony, felt immense pride. With her heart warmed by her students' achievements, she reflected, "They are living proof that empathy and solidarity can transform lives." Sophia stepped onto the stage to receive her diploma during the graduation ceremony. The auditorium was filled with applause, and Mrs. Oliveira's tears of pride flowed. She did it, she thought, recalling every moment of difficulty and progress. Miguel also stood out in the ceremony, receiving praise for his hard work and dedication. As he stepped onto the stage to receive his award, he thought, "I'm so proud of myself. I never thought I could reach this point." After the ceremony, Mrs. Oliveira, full of enthusiasm, approached Sophia and Miguel. "You two are the reason I do what I do," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Seeing your growth and success is the greatest reward I could ask for." Hugging the two young people, she expressed her gratitude for all they had achieved. "Thank you, Mrs. Oliveira," Sophia said with a grateful voice. "We know that with support and determination, we can achieve anything." Sophia's words deeply moved Mrs. Oliveira, who smiled. Feeling honored to have been part of their lives, she replied, "You have taught me as much as I have taught you." Miguel also expressed his gratitude. "Our lives were completely transformed by you. We'll never forget everything you've done for us," he said, his eyes tearful. "You gave us hope and a future." Mrs. Oliveira knew the effects of her actions would extend beyond the school's boundaries. Committing to continue being a compassionate teacher, attentive to her students' needs, she thought, "As long as there is empathy and understanding, we can transform the world." The story of Miguel, Sophia, and Mrs. Oliveira shows the effects of empathy, kindness, and solidarity. Sophia's kindness in helping Miguel made a difference not only for Miguel, but also for the entire school, impacting many others and creating a more united and strong community. Mrs. Oliveira's transformation from a strict and disciplinary teacher to a compassionate educator attentive to her students' needs demonstrates that change and growth are possible at any stage of life. The characters in this story work together to show that simple acts of kindness can have a lasting impact, inspiring everyone to be more compassionate and supportive. Thus, the school became a place of welcome and solidarity, where all children had the chance to grow and thrive. The legacy of understanding and compassion continued to affect future generations, reminding everyone that true strength lies in kindness and mutual support.